To request you to stand up so that the people can see you. Mr. John Nwodo, the Ike Uke, the Ike Nsuka, the Ike Nigeria, a barrister at law, and a specialist in economics. By the grace of God, is also the President General of Ohanes and Igbo. A prolific writer that has delivered more than 120 speeches in the last 2 years. And that is why ESU Business School thought it wise to invite him to x-ray the topic, economic implications of a restructured Nigeria. May we therefore rise to give a standing ovation to this enormous and inspiring. He's a man of distinction, integrity, hard work, honesty, and perseverance, an achiever of excellence, a man committed to rigorous and vibrant scholarship and social responsibility, a great leader and an asset to the Igbo people, to Nigeria, and to the world at large. I present you John Nnia.
Please sit down. Name you seriously by the way you distinguish yourselves here, either as judges, professors, or senior citizens. We will be eating into too much time. Already we are sweating, and the university deeply regrets that the hotel has not lived up to its expectations. So I will go through this speech as quickly as I can, so that I spare you the ordeal we are all going through. In 1960, Nigeria attained sovereign independence from Great Britain and became an independent country by a progressive development of several constitutions culminating in London Conference. The three regions created by the Macpherson Constitution of 1951 emerged on the Nigerian Constitution Order in Council of 1960. This independence constitution retained the regional setup and made provisions for separate constitutions for each of the regions. Powers were shared between the federal government and regional governments. The powers of the federal government were set out on the exclusive legislative list consisting of 44 subjects that included principally defense, currency, external affairs, mines and power, Lagos affairs, and customs. There was a concurrent list of 28 subjects on which both the federal and regional governments had competence. The residual powers were reserved to the regions on subjects not listed in the exclusive legislative list. By the adoption of the Federal Constitution in 1960, Nigeria chose a federal system of government. Judge Anderson, in his work on, and I quote, Federalism, an Introduction, lists 5 characteristics common to all federations. They include 1, at least 2 orders of government, one of the whole country and another for the regions. Each government has a direct electoral relationship with its citizens. 2, a written constitution, some parts of which cannot be amended by the federal government alone. 3, a constitution that formally allocates legislative, including fiscal powers, to the 2 orders of government, ensuring some genuine autonomy for each order. 4, usually special arrangements, notably in the upper houses, for the representation of constituent units in key central institutions to provide for regional input in central decision making. 5, an umpire, usually involving courts, but sometimes referendum or an upper house, to rule on constitutional disputes between governments. 6, a set of processes and institutions for facilitating or conducting relations between governments. In conclusion, he stated that if there is an essence of federalism, it is that there are two constitutionally established orders of government with some genuine autonomy from each other, and that the governments at each level are principally accountable to their respective electorates. Nigeria's federal constitutional arrangement transformed into a federal republic with the translation of the Governor General to President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces in 1963. Nigeria's federal system of government lasted from 1960 to 1966, when the military took over power and promulgated Unification Decree number 34, which set aside the regional arrangement and created a unified structure, a unified civil service structure for the whole country. Whereas the First Republic failed politically, it succeeded economically. The First Republic witnessed a continuous crisis of ethnic tensions and struggle for the control of federal government, the implosion of the Action Group, and the violence that attended it in Western region, the census crisis, and a general breakdown of law and order. Notwithstanding these political upheavals, the regions laid strong economic foundations. In agriculture, massive growth of export was witnessed in production of cotton and groundnuts in the north, cocoa in the west, palm produce in the east, and rubber in the Midwest. New universities were built in Zaria, Lagos, Ibadan, and Nsukka. Import substitution industries grew exponentially. They included textile industries, breweries, iron and steel complexes, cement factories, building material industries, marble production industries, and tire manufacturing plants. In infrastructure, new and strong roads were built by the regions. Railway lines were up and running and efficient. Power was generated from locally mined coal. Many Nigerian youths gained government scholarships to study in Europe and America, all within 3 years. Between 1966 and 1979, the Nigerian Armed Forces dominated the rulership of Nigeria, an entrenched military system of governance in Nigeria. Between 1967 and 1970, Nigeria was at war, and issues of forms of government took a back seat until the war ended. Soon after the Nigerian Civil War ended, the Arab-Israeli War intensified. Its effect on the consolidation of unitary system of governance in Nigeria was captured by Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako in his book, Nigeria, the Forsaken Road to Nationhood and Development, where he wrote, and I quote, "The impact was immediate, profound, and strategic. By the end of the war in March 1974, the price of crude oil had risen so abruptly from barely $3 to $12 per barrel. The sudden price hike put a lot of unprecedented petrodollars in Nigerian coffers, thus giving her relatively huge economic power all too quickly. As the country and her few privileged citizens basked in the new environment of greed and entitlement, the military ruling class tightened the noose of unitary governance with each section of the country. The further drift to unitary governance and an all-powerful central government was clearly reflected in the progressive decline of the derivation principle in the sharing of national revenues between the federal government and the federating units from 100% in 1953 through 50% in 1964 and 45% in 1970. Derivation fell to 20% in 1975 and ultimately to 0% in 1979. Every attempt to amend the Nigerian constitution by the Babangida government in 1979, the Abacha government in 1993, and the Obasanjo government in 1999 ended in consolidation of the unitary system of government. President Jonathan's constitutional conference would have whittled down the all-powerful federal government had it been more courageous and enabled a debate and enactment of its resolutions in the national and state assemblies. Right now, we remain under a unitary system of government, even though we are called a federation. The 1979 and 1999 constitutions by which we have been governed in all our civil democracies since 1979 are impositions of military governments. None of these constitutions were subjected to a plebiscite, yet they begin with the opening, "We the people of Nigeria." The Southern and Middle Belt Leadership Forum and a number of other well-meaning Nigerians have called for a new constitution, which must restructure our constitutional framework and take us back to something similar to what we had in 1963. The proponents of restructuring insist that Nigeria should have 1. 6 federating units or regions, or states as federating units, a separate constitution for the regions, defining the relationship between the regions and the states within them, an exclusive legislative list for the federating units, which will include, among other things, 1. Domestic security, which implies establishment of state and regional police. 2. Sovereignty over oil and natural resources. 3. A judicial system that gives exclusive jurisdiction for matters under the exclusive legislative list for the federating units and allows them to have high courts, court of appeal, and Supreme Court at the level of the federating units, and many other items. The reason the earth for restructuring is to reduce the cost of governance, limit the retarding influence of ethnic conflicts and fear of domination in public administration, unleash a spirit of healthy competition among the federating units for optimal development of the country and unbundle the federal government. Now let us look at the statistical evidence that make the argument for restructuring compelling. As I speak to you today, Nigeria's external debt has grown from $10.3 billion in 2015 to $15 billion in 2017, and added another $5.5 billion this year, increasing our total external indebtedness to $20 billion. Our domestic debt has grown from 8.8 trillion naira in 2015 to 14 trillion naira in 2017. Domestic debt component for the 36 states has risen from 1.6 trillion naira in 2015 to 2.9 trillion naira in June 2017. The Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPPRA, announced on June 9 this year that the federal government's subsidy on fuel has risen to 2.4 billion daily from 774 million in March 2018. The rise, according to them, is as a result of the high price of crude oil in the international market. Interestingly, while this huge expenditure is incurred, no provision of it has been made in our annual budgets, and one wonders how we have the authority to make this expenditure. Nor has any reported increase been announced in our excess crude oil reserve account. The real situation is that we are running huge subsidy bills because our local refineries are not running at 100% of installed capacity and are unable to meet domestic demand. Surprisingly, growth of new refineries capable of bridging supply gap in the near future looks dim. One wonders why we cannot afford such drain, drain from our national resource, which can guarantee loan for new refineries and resuscitate old ones, whilst we make a national sacrifice for higher petroleum prices for about 2 years. On the 7th of November last year, Moody's Investment Service downgraded Nigeria's sovereign issuers rating to B2, citing their rationale as the largely unsuccessful effort of the Nigerian authorities to increase non-oil revenue and persistent key structural weaknesses. Well, you know that Bill Gates recently said the same thing to us. The federal government has on 2 occasions released bailout funds to enable states meet their recurrent expenditure requirements. Only about 9 states in Nigeria, namely Lagos, Kano, Enugu, Edo, Delta, Abia, Rivers, Anambra, and Kwara, have their internally generated revenue sufficient enough to cover their interest repayments on their debts without depending on allocations from federally collected revenue. According to budget research, in its scale of ability to meet the current expenditure obligation rankings, only 4 states, namely Katsina, Kano, Rivers, and Lagos, have average monthly revenue in excess of average monthly recurrent expenditure. For the federal government, close to 40% of its annual revenue was spent on servicing of interest repayments on debts, and according to the International Monetary Fund, this percentage is expected to increase further. According to Fitch Ratings, Nigeria's government's gross debts are 320% of its annual revenue, one of the highest in the world. Michael Kalikume, writing in Daily Trust on the 12th of December 2015, quotes that, and I quote, Nigerian economy has grossly underperformed relative to her enormous resource endowments and her peer nations. It has the 6th largest gas reserves in the world and the 8th largest crude oil reserves in the world. It is endowed in commercial quantities with about 37 solid mineral types and has a population of over 170 million. Yet, economic performance has been rather weak and does not reflect these endowments. Compared with the emerging Asian countries, increased 3.3% quarter on quarter in the second quarter of 2017, recovering from a 13.3% contraction in the first quarter. GDP growth rate in Nigeria averaged 1.17% from 2010 until 2017, reaching an all-time high of 10.59% in the third quarter of 2010, and a record low of minus 13.98% in the third quarter of 2016. In the face of this economic reality, the Population Reference Bureau predicts that Nigeria will in 2050 become the world's 4th largest population, with a population of 397 million, coming after China, India, and the United States of America. And mark this is only 32 years away. A non-governmental organization in Vienna, World Poverty Corps, founded by the German government and led by a man called Homik Kraras, Deputy Director of the Brookings Institute in the United States, and Wolfgang Fengler, a World Bank head economist, is predicting that Nigeria will overtake India as the country is rising in 30 countries. In these nations, a total of 9 million more people will be living in extreme poverty at the end of 2017 than 12 months previously in their considered view. Very few countries in Africa are making fast enough progress on ending poverty. And in 2 large countries, he says, Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo, their populations are growing faster than their economic growth. So poverty will continue to rise. We need a dramatic break from current trends in over 20 countries in order to end poverty worldwide. Nigeria's population in extreme poverty is rising by 5.7 people per minute, and that of the Democratic Republic of Congo by 3.6 million people per minute. The situation in Nigeria is such that in February next year, it will overtake India as the most people living in extreme poverty in the world at 82 million. In 2011, 5 colonels in the American States Center for Strategy and Technology, Air War College, did a case study on Nigeria and the global consequences of its implosion, and came out with a conclusion that, and I quote, despite its best efforts, Nigeria has a long-term struggle ahead to remain a viable state, much less a top 20 economy. Faced with this grim economic reality and a structure inimical to growth, what is therefore our way forward? Our growth model has to change for us to survive as a country. A model based on sharing of government revenue must give way to a new structure that will challenge and drive productivity in different regions across the country. This new model must take into account that factors driving productivity in today's world are no longer driven by fossil oil, rather the proliferation of a knowledge-based economy. The restructuring of Nigeria into smaller and independent federating units and the devolution of powers to these federation units to control exclusively their human capital development, mineral resources, agriculture, and power, albeit with an obligation to contribute to the federal government, is the only way to salvage our fledgling economy. Restructuring will devote attention to the new wealth area, promote competition and productivity, As the new federating units struggle to survive, it will drastically reduce corruption as the large federal parastatals, which got government revenue for little or no impact, dissolve and give way to small and viable organs in the new federating units. Those campaigning against restructuring in Nigeria have painted an unfortunate and untrue picture that those of us in support of restructuring are doing so in order to deny the northern states who have not yet any proven oil reserves any ability to survive. This is unfortunate. The new model we propose for Nigeria recognizes that revenue in the world today is promoted by two main sources, namely human capital development leveraging on technology to drive the critical sectors of the economy and agriculture. 10 years ago, the 10 top companies in the world were companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, and Total, all energy companies. Today, the top 8 companies in the world are represented by technology-related companies and include companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. The example of the Netherlands in agriculture is also relevant here. The Netherlands is the 18th largest economy in the world. It has a land area of about 33,900 square kilometers. Niger State, one of Nigeria's 37 administrative units, has about 74,000 square kilometers. Netherlands has over $100 billion from agricultural exports annually, contributed mainly by vegetables and dairy. Nigeria's oil revenue has never in any one year reached $100 billion. Northern Nigeria is the most endowed agriculturally in Nigeria. Its tomatoes, carrots, cabbages, cucumber, tubers, grains, livestock, and dairy feed the majority of Nigerians in spite of its huge reserve of unexploited export potential. In a restructured Nigeria, Northern Nigeria with the right agricultural policies will be the richest part of Nigeria. Our analysis here must be viewed from the background that the deadlines have been fixed by OECD countries and China for the cessation of production of automobiles and machines dependent on fossil oil. This development and the new technology for production of shale oil in the United States have made world dependence on Nigeria's crude oil a rapidly declining phenomenon. In the last few years, our youths, reacting to the adverse economic situation that has made them destitute and without hope for a better future, have become restive. The politically conscious ones amongst them have evolved into self-determination groups, some of which include IPOB, MASOP, Yelicom, Arewa Youths, Niger Delta Republic, and Middle Belt Republic. Of these groups, IPOB and Boko Haram have been designated as terrorist organizations by the federal government. This development in relation to IPOB is unfortunate. Boko Haram is an armed organization which has attacked and occupied Nigerian territory, hoisted its flag and appointed local authority government. It has abducted and abused Nigerian women, kidnapped and imprisoned many, and killed over 200,000 people. It is still involved in guerrilla warfare against Nigeria. Yet the federal government is negotiating with them. No member of Boko Haram captured by the military was put under trial until after my Chatham House speech in September last. Members of this federal government are on record for condemning the previous government for brutal murder of Boko Haram members and condemning the retired chief of army staff for zealous prosecution of the anti-terror campaign. Members of the sect who confess to a change of mind have been received along with their abducted female partners in the presidency and rehabilitated. The declaration of IPOB as a terrorist organization is, in my view, horrid, unfair, and not in conformity with the intent of the law. Whereas I am not completely in agreement with some of the methods of IPOB, like its inappropriate and divisive broadcasts. The uncontested evidence given by the Attorney General of the Federation in an interlocutory action claiming that IPOB attempted or actually snatched guns from local law enforcement agents are, if proven, mainly criminal offenses. they do not constitute enough evidence to meet international law definitions of terrorist organization. Happily, the United States Embassy in Nigeria shares this conclusion and asserted that the United States government does not recognize IPOB as a terrorist organization. This same armed IPOB that is being stigmatized by the Nigerian government had its members murdered in Asaba, Nkpo, Aba, and Port Harcourt simply for having public demonstrations without the federal government ordering a judicial inquiry. Instead, after I had called for one, and Amnesty International provided evidence that 150 of them were killed, the Chief of Army Staff set up an inquiry composed of 7 and retired members of the armed forces, thereby compromising the rules of natural justice, which prescribes that you cannot be a judge in your own court. The Igbos in Nigeria feel that the treatment of IPOB is unfair, discriminatory, and an overkill. They see the move as an attempt to encourage a profiling of Igbos in the international security arena. We know of other self-determination groups in Nigeria that are armed and have destroyed government and private sector installations and wells that government prefers to negotiate rather than label them as terrorist organizations. Fulani headsmen, otherwise called Fulani militants, have ravaged farms in the Middle Belt, southwest and southeastern Nigeria, killing several farmers in the process. In January 2016, they killed 500 farmers and their families in Agatu in Benue State. This year alone, over 1,000 people have been murdered by them in the Middle Belt, and many more displaced from their homes. In Enugu State, they murdered more than 100 farmers in Ukwabi in Nimbo in April 2016. Photographs depicting them with automatic rifles checked the entire world media. Yet, not one of them is facing criminal charges, nor is Operation Python dance being conducted in the area where they ravage and kill. And the federal government describes them as criminals and not a terrorist organization, notwithstanding their classification by the Global Terrorist Index as the 4th deadliest terrorist group in the world. See British Independence newspaper of 12 July 2016, which indicated that Fulani headsmen killed 1,000 people in the year 2014. The recent deployment of soldiers to the southeast in Operation Python Dance is, in my view, unfortunate. Deployment of the army is only allowed in circumstances of insurrection, terrorism, and external aggression, not in the preventing or killing of priests or fighting kidnapping. And in those circumstances where they can be deployed, leave of the Senate must be sought. The brazen impunity in dealing with matters that concern the Southeast is provocative. But far more important, it's important to remind us that we have wasted so much money in fighting insurgency in this country because of the system of government that we operate. Since we began to encourage local vigilante groups in the Southeast, kidnapping has reduced considerably. There were times that people had traditional engagement ceremonies in Lagos and in Abuja because they were afraid of having them here, especially in Anambra State and in Imo State. But today, that is no longer the situation. I have driven from Onitsha to Enugu at 1 a.m. without feeling that I faced any security threat. And yet, the Inspector General of Police tells us to hand over the double-barrel guns that our local vigilante carry. Do you change the winning team in the middle of the contest? Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, our country stands on the edge of a precipice. As we approach a general election, we must embrace it as our last opportunity to salvage the sovereignty of our country. Only restructuring can save us. Any party that does not support the restructuring of our country is singing its own non-dimittions. I cannot end this lecture, Mr. Vice Chancellor, without thanking the management of the suit and the Enugu State University of Science and Technology for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. I was one of the founding members of the Governing Council of AC Business Group, but I was dismissed without even the courtesy of being informed.
We can do more. We can do more. We can do more. Give me a round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just
During your lecture, I had no energized IPOB, yet they attack you at any given opportunity. Why don't you attack them back? Thank you.
I'm a student of Institute Business School. My question is, as we've heard all you said, what are the efforts being made by Amazon Debo to foster this agitation? Or to make it say true, what are the efforts being made so far? Thank you, sir.
Bonaventure Hara. My question is, following your lectures from Macpherson Constitution and getting to the unitary system of government from federalism, and now it does appear the effort to get back to where we started from, that appeared or that was successful, is not in sight. As you push for restructuring, from your lecture you gave it as the only option. Outside that option, is there any other way? And if that option is the only option, how do we realize it? If it fails, what alternative do you offer?
In course of your lecture, you did say something about population. Now, between the divide of the North and the South, religion plays a very prominent role in population index. In the North, they are majorly Muslims, and they have 4 wives to a man. Here we have 1 wife to a man as Christians. Now, how will we manage the population index in such a way that there will be balance in these proposed restructures?
Contribution is this, based on restructuring. Our concept how can we help ourselves if we cannot be recognized in the national politics? For example, how can Ohanes and Igbo ensure that the leaders of Igbo people in our various states utilize the little money they have to develop their areas and their states? What I mean is engaging in meaningful projects that will help us maybe grow our economy irrespective of whatever thing we get from federal assistance for now. Is there any effort by the Igbo to make sure or to insist that our governors in the issue is do the right thing? Another thing is that when it comes to agriculture, I know that most of the...
I am Obioma Lemoa, Institute Business School. I share your thoughts on the prescription of IPOB. But sometime far away in London, we were told that the herdsmen were a spillover from Libya. Just last week or thereabout, in one of the states in Nigeria, 5 Nigerians were placed on death by hanging for killing a herdsman. Now my question is Nigerian government using 5 Nigerian heads to pay for a Libyan head? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure that is a very good thing for a child to attack his father in public. And I think it is more disgraceful for the father to accentuate the quarrel. Let me tell you, the killed history in our country and the murder of history in our curriculum has led to such a yawning gap of knowledge. And for those of us who are parents here, I ask you, spend some quality time with your children and make sure that they know what you know. Otherwise, you will be 2 people in the same bed but dreaming different dreams. And my children confront me with intellectual pugilism on account of their conviction. But the good thing about intellectual warfare is that, like in the if you have a higher logic and arguments and evidence, it becomes clear to them and they knuckle on them. Now, I was in Biafra as an adult. I participated in the Biafra War as a soldier. I fought behind enemy lines. I lived in a village called Oheboba in Nsukka, where we went at night. Linus Obai here was my colleague. We both were in the army. We went to launch guerrilla attacks at moving federal troops. We threw bombs, incendiary bombs on them, we fired at them, and we ran away from the location completely so that they could not see us. I know what war is. When I came out from there, a casualty, and was discharged from the hospital in Nnia, I went to work with Colonel Nwodo in the School of Infantry. I was there till the war ended. May his soul rest in peace. Now, during that war, we lost 3 million people. 1.5 million people were killed in warfare, in the most inhuman and degrading atrocities that mankind has ever witnessed. But international law and international diplomacy is a matter of conspiracy of international powers. What they don't like becomes a crime. What they like is conveniently neglected. Now, nobody in Nigeria has been tried for using aircrafts to bomb civilian populations in Biafra and destroy people with reckless abandonment. I lost a cousin who a sharp nail of an aircraft hit on his leg as he was taking cover from an Air Force attack. He was the only son of his father. His father was killed in the pogrom in Zaria as he was about to enter a railway train to come back to the southeast. That nuclear family has been denied of a male progenitor simply because of the war. Now, not only were 1.5 million people killed, 1 million people were killed by starvation. Parents watched their children die of hunger. The immediate symptoms, for those who are doctors here, they can explain it better. It begins with swelling of the arms. It begins with your cheeks swelling. It begins with your eyes turning brown, and they call it malnutrition, otherwise kwashiorkor. Parents have to eat to have energy to go looking for food in order that their children will eat. Now, the Catholic Church and many other Christian organizations, Christian denominations, helped us through Caritas and all sorts to bring in food. We were a landlocked area. The only way by which this food was brought to us was whenever arms were brought, they were brought through one airport, Uli Airport. That was also the only place they could bring aircrafts carrying food. Now, in 3 attempts to land in Uli aircraft, in every night, perhaps only 2 landed at the most. One either went back or was shattered in the air by Nigerian jets and anti-aircraft weapons. Now, sometimes the runway was destroyed, and the Biafran engineers rebuilt them within 24 hours. Many of you do not know the technology that we had during the war. We had the capacity of, you know, when we studied chemistry in secondary school, we did hydrocarbons and we did what we call fractional distillation of petroleum. And in Biafra, I saw steel pots for heating crude oil built of heights almost attaining half of the height of this hotel. And their back was plastered with sand, compressed sand as plaster, in order to increase the capacity for heating, to insulate the iron pots. And they were fired by coal and all sorts of energy that were locally available, including firewood. And at different temperatures, they distilled vapor from them that condensed to become diesel, petrol, or kerosene. We did it in Biafra. We had incendiary bombs. But all that resilience and capacity for using human capital development when the world did not know about it could not stop us from being defeated in the world. Because we did not have international support. And the international countries that supported Nigeria to vanquish us advised Nigeria to ensure that minerals and oil became an exclusive item in the exclusive federal legislative list as soon as the war ended. My father, as Minister of Commerce and Industry in Eastern Nigeria, commissioned the first oil well of Nigeria in a place called Oloibiri in Bayelsa. It was a resource of the Eastern Nigerian government. All we needed to do was to pay royalties to the federal government. But as soon as the war ended, they could not conceive of a region defeated in war becoming the richest region in Nigeria. So they took oil from us. The board of NNPC that controls the oil today has only one Igbo man, Kachiku, on the board, and only one Yoruba man, and only one man from the South. The rest are northerners. Of the management cadre, the north occupy 8%. It's like the tail wagging the dog. The oil is from here, but they administer it and they share it as part of the war booty. Now, you have asked me to fight them. You have, somebody has asked me, outside the structuring, what alternative do you have? Father Beneventure, I'm taking your question along with Obidima's question. You know, there is a book called The Man in the Arena. I'm sure you have read it. I happen to be placed by history at a junction where I am the man in the arena. I have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. And those who do not have what the knowledge I'm sharing with you will criticize me out of the positive of their knowledge. They believe that the only thing we must do now is to have Biafra. Like Professor Nwodo positive, after if restructuring fails, what do we do? Now you see, if you are going to warfare, you must look at the strategy of it. What is possible? Clearly, if we had a country of our own, I'd be the happiest person. But let us look at it intellectually, because this is an intellectual discussion. Number one, every time we come out as Igbos to champion something, they fight us with all that they can muster. We tried the war, they bombed us with reckless abandon, they violated international human rights, nobody did anything about it. Our children got up and said, oh, we want to resuscitate that Biafra. They brought up Operation Python dance. They began to shoot and kill and even try to make people drown in shallow water. We confronted the GOC of 82 Division. He promised us that he was going to court-martial the soldiers identified in those fields. I'm still waiting for them. I keep reminding him in opportunities like this that they have not done anything. Now, I cannot divulge some of the undertakings that they had in circumstances that are classified. But it will come to a time that I will have no chance but to do so. But being the man in the arena, I have to know that I have to keep certain discussions quiet until the time comes for it to be public. But my brothers and sisters, if we go and insist that we want the answer, how do we get it? If you try it, it will amount to treason to try to secede again from Nigeria. They will have an official reason to come to war against us. How many societies have survived 2 wars in a generation? I said before publicly that if anybody will negotiate a situation in which war will come to the southeast again, I will be a saboteur. I will not be prepared to expose our children to be annihilated with reckless abandon. The one that they have done in Bible dance, what can we do?
We have petitioned the United Nations. The Secretary General of the United Nations came here through his Deputy Secretary with 7 directors to see me. I invited our own ambassadors. I invited Akubuzu, who was boss to Chambers, who came to see me. I invited Nwodo. I invited Ojako. And he was intimidated by their presence because they were his seniors in the foreign service. What the heck can it mean? Under this federal government, a northern lady is now Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. So what am I going to do in the United Nations that they have already possessed? What did the United Nations do for Catalonia? In Spain, what did they do for them? In their own case, they voted. They said they wanted independence. The European Union said no. The federal government of Spain said no. The United Nations said no. Where are you and I in international diplomacy to change them to our advantage at this stage? When the people in Spain cannot achieve it. When the people in Bayern in Germany cannot achieve it. One illiterate man in my father's compound, see, about Biafra, Odugu addressed the Constituent Assembly why shells were raining on us and we were being constricted every day into smaller circles of the territory called Biafra. A chief from Uji got up. I took my father to the meeting. The chief from Uji got up. After Odugu addressing them, he leaves. And the leaders and traditional rulers confer, make a resolution and tell him. The man got up, all he said in Igbo, and in his native Udi, Ibai Ashimo, Opa Nene Nwodo Baka Wobono, Jim Oyon Nwodo. Let me tell you, if you have not had the sound of shelling, you don't know what it is. Those of us here who survived the war, it's just by the grace of God. It's not by our skills. So why should I bring it on my children if I have other alternatives? What is the alternative? I left Enugu here after a national executive meeting of Ohanese and went to Chief Adebanjo, the leader of our Fenifere in Lagos, and said, we all feel the same way, but we are not working together. Say, well, I'm afraid of your people. We tried before when we were fighting at Abiola's mandate. You come and say you work with us, and then after you left, I said, but you know this thing I'm coming to see you. My people are very worried about my coming to see you. Because when we were going to war, Nwodo came and told us that if the East goes, the West will go. And when we went, he became the deputy chairman of the Federal Executive Council that was used to fight us. So the distrust you have for us, we have more for you. So we appeal. Chief Irugu was present at the meeting. Between self-determination and restructuring. Self-determination, you have Biafra. It's our own republic. Doesn't matter if you have a head of state that requires everybody to kneel for him every morning. That's all right. But we have our independence. But in restructuring, you have your own domestic policy. In other words, this thing they do to us on the main road, this thing they bring only northern commissioners of police and state directors of state security who do not understand Igbo, understand our side, a number of who live here richer than they came, will no longer happen. I have had occasions to stop on the road to dismantle a checkpoint without a weapon. Thanks to the GOC, he stopped the checkpoint at Oji River. Every time I passed Oji River to go to Anambra, I found young Igbo boys put on the side collecting money for soldiers there who are supposed to be protecting us. And I asked the soldiers, if this is your place, will you be teaching these children this kind of vice? I was risking my life. They were armed. My security details told me I was exposing myself to risk. But that's what is called the man in the arena. Now, so if we have restructuring, we have our own police. If we have restructuring, all domestic laws that are made in the exclusive legislative list are within the jurisdiction of our own judiciary. In other words, we didn't need Justice Rhodes' Bible in the Supreme Court to strike down Igbo customary law. It will be struck down by the Eastern Regional Supreme Court. Because we will understand it better and we will be able to interpret it. You do not need them to try traffic offenses in Enugu or in Onitsha or in Aba or anywhere down there. They will be tried in our local courts, and we will have the right of appeal up to Supreme Court level at this level without going to Lagos, without going to Abuja. So that is first bank. Second, the coal in Enugu will be owned by the Enugu State government. The limestone and salt in Abakaliki will be owned by the Ebonyi State government. The gas, oil in Imo, in Abia, in Anambra will be owned by their respective governments. They will only be paying royalty to the federal government. On this percentage we recommended, the states retain 50%, the regions retain 35%, the federal government retain 15%. Is it not the same thing as Biafra?
Metaphor.
Now, why should we make that sacrifice to have restructuring rather than having all of it alone? Two reasons are impelling. They may not be obvious to you now. Number one, I come from a town called Ukele. They have a famous saying that Golo 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 is cleverness. It is natural to the monkey. If you have ever done the game of hunting, it's very difficult to aim at a monkey and kill it with ease because of its agility and its capacity, to dodge. The Igbo man is naturally ingenious, has the capacity to survive difficult situations. There is no state of Nigeria you go to today that the next largest population outside the indigenous population is not Igbo. For this reason, Igbos are very sizable. I don't want to say they control because somebody will say we are dominating them. They are sizable in economies of other areas outside Igbo land. An Igbo man built a university in Ogun State. An Igbo man built a tomato curing industry in Sokoto State. There is no township you go in Nigeria and look for the entertainment industry, hotels like this, and they are not owned by Igbo men. Let me ask you, when we all come here and stay in a restructured Nigeria, which gives us exclusive right to our resources, is it not an advantage that we can also do business in a greater area called Nigeria and realize economies of scale? Doesn't it make economic sense? Fine. Number two of them are involved in research and production, but their products populate the world. We don't need all to have the same quality of education. But if in every session you graduate 100 people who are as good as the best people from the best technology institutes in America, in India, and everywhere, people have to become a different place. It is the thought that germinates into wealth. It is not in how many you produce. I know that for your revenue, you need to have a large number of students. But you can focus on some departments that are engines for the growth, for the future, and use them to germinate a future for us. So I don't know if I've answered your question about efforts by our Igbos as a socio-cultural organization. Whatever influence that I have, or my national executive, or the organization has on our political leaders is purely advisory and persuasive. The good thing is that by our constitution, there are members of Ohanese. And so, whatever decision we take there we take there in the full view of them. But I must remind you something. Under a federal setting, our governors are bishops without a cathedral. Believe you me, they are bishops without a cathedral. If you look at the federal allocation, use Enugu as a typology. And that's why I think my governor is a miracle worker. Look, from the bottom of the ladder, Enugu is the third in federally allocated revenue. The third. But Enugu is not owing salary in the public sector. It's not owing anybody by attempt management, skillful use of scarce resources. But it also leaves Enugu with very little left for capital development. Now, we have our planning and strategy committee in Ohanese, which was the committee that midwives our summit in Oka and the Igbo agenda on restructuring. That committee is sized now with a new agenda. The agenda is our economic growth. We think we must take the engine of economic growth away from the public sector into the private sector. For instance, we have appointed a board of trustees for Ohanese who will manage our resources. They include our elder statesmen. Every state has 2 members of the board of trustees, except Rivers and Delta that have 1 member each. In Abia, the 2 members are Obitu Kiwe and Joe Iruku. These are men that you won't say will chop our money. In Anambra, it is Obi of Onitsha and Emeka Anyoku. Now, you see, these kind of people we've chosen in every state. What do we want to do? We've already got a resolution of Igbo Obi that every Igbo man should pay 100 naira a month to Ohanese, man and woman. Now, when they gave us the quick notice in the north, I did a census of Igbos in the north using the Igbo organizations and the parochial organization. When I say parochial, it's like town union organization. Fine. Now, we documented families in Igbo, of Igbo origin in northern Nigeria, 11.6 million. Yes. Assuming 40% of them are adults who can pay 100 naira a month. And you get about 5 million of them paying. You know what it comes to in 1 month. You know what it comes to in 1 year. This is what we want Iruku and Crew to manage for us. So that Ohanese executive goes to the General Assembly of Ohanese every year with a budget like a governor goes to the House of Assembly. This is what we want to spend for this year. All these billions we have collected from Igbos, it must be managed by the Board of Trustees in consultation with the executive order. But we will now have this blueprint that Soludo is working on. All our entrepreneurs, we're inviting all of them. We are doing case studies of businesses that can grow here, that we will put that money. I give you one for instance. We want a rail track between Onitsha, the highest market in the land, and Enugu Airport, a designated cargo airport. We want a rail line from Enugu Airport to Aba, the highest trade market in Igbo land. If we are able to have these 2 infrastructural facilities within 5 years, the amount of employment they will generate, the mobility of factors of production that they will accelerate. We will also engage our universities in research on agriculture. I know that the Abia state government is right now trying to import cows from Brazil to crossbreed with our local Muturu cow, that is the Igbo cow, so that it can be more fleshy and it can stand our weather conditions. That experiment is being supported by University of Nigeria, Suka Consultancy Unit, and is going on as I speak to you. So
It is my honor and privilege to present the plaque to Chief Nwodo, who has done a wonderful job today. And, I don't know whether the lecture itself, the written one, was very good, but you asked for one. And I think the questions and answers turned out to be even better than the written one. And for that, we are really very grateful. So this plaque, I'm not presenting only on behalf of the Business Council, Business School. I think it's on behalf of all of us here present who listen to this wonderful day. I hope you agree with me.
It's not easy to be the man in the arena and to be listened to. In some climes, some would have come to take the microphone from me, but you were such a wonderful audience. And I'm just hoping that SU Business School will emulate what we do in the Enugu Sports Club. We now have a monthly event in Enugu Sports Club in which we choose an issue critical to our life as Igbos and bring a leading lecturer to talk about it and we discuss it. In the university parlance, this is called town and gown. If it is possible for the business school to do this regularly, so that we get opportunity to discuss the things around us. Ngozi here has come with Professor to tell me about how they are trying to start Igbo school clinics. Doesn't it really surprise you that our sister, I remember that I was born when you were in Standard 6. And she wrote me a letter 2 months ago and said, between you and I, we have 13 years gap, but you're looking older than me. Sister, you can see I'm the man in the arena.